Hi, Dan. Welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much. My name's Dan Sakai, and I guess right now I'm living in Japan. My wife's a Navy officer working in the hospital, so we're over here with our kids. I have a variety of backgrounds. I've worked in the financial industry for a long time. I teach scuba diving, so I'm a course director at PADI. So it means I've worked in a couple of different places in California and the Virgin Islands, teaching people and taking people on tours. And I just try to keep busy. My kids keep me pretty busy as it is. And right now I work in the financial services here virtually. And so I'm looking forward to having a nice conversation with you all.
Dan, my name is Dan also, so you have a great name. It's a pleasure to get to know you tonight along with our guests who are listening to this. And I know it's nighttime where we are, but it's morning time the next day where you are. So we appreciate you taking the time to come on here today. Couple things that we connect on. So I have two sisters-in-laws that are nurses. I have two brothers that were in the Navy, went to the Naval Academy. And I'm curious, mostly, your last name, where does it come from?
So my grandfather was Japanese. So he grew up in Tokyo, and then in the, I guess, around 1918, I suppose, he decided he was going to go to the States, and he graduated from Stanford and settled in New York, where he met my grandmother. And so, yes, I don't look very Japanese. I am a mostly European background, plus a little Japanese in there. And that's where it comes from.
And so I didn't want to assume anything, but I would have guessed by the last name that it was a Japanese last name. So that's a really cool story. So the reason we invited you on here tonight is because Ivy is great at bringing on very cool people from a diverse amount of backgrounds and life experiences. We have one overall theme, which is helping people have access to people they may have never come across in their regular life. And unless they were in Japan or you were visiting back in America, they may have never come across you. So through the series of asking you questions and you answering them, hopefully people will hear something that they connect with you on and can lead them to maybe take a new action, and it'll help them live their best life. So we're excited to have you on here.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
One of the things that you said about your background being a PADI scuba instructor, I know who to talk to if I want to get advanced certified, because I love scuba diving and I did get certified in Bermuda. So that was the last time I went scuba diving, and I do miss it.
So Dan, one of the questions that Ivy and I typically ask our coaching clients is a question so we can identify if there's something they always dreamed about, wanted, but maybe they never pursued or stopped pursuing for some reason. Maybe it was out of reach or they failed at trying or something like that. And the question is, if I was a genie and I could grant you just one wish, what would be that wish and why? But I'm going to put some rules surrounding it. You cannot wish for more wishes. That's cheating the system. You can't wish to become the wish giver like the genie. So what is that thing maybe that you're like, oh, if I could just get it through a wish, that would be what I want?
My biggest wish revolves primarily around my mother. And she died about a week, almost exactly, I guess, exactly a week after my first son was born. And at the time, my wife and I were living in the Virgin Islands. I was teaching scuba diving and taking tourists out on tours. And it was during the summer, so it was a pretty busy time. And I was working every day. And I was obviously with my wife when my son was born. And then, like any new parent, I let my family know that we had a healthy young boy, and that gave him the name and everything else, and that I promised to send her some pictures. So, but being busy, and my wife had to spend a couple extra days in the hospital. So, as things get pushed off, and so I figured, well, I'd send them when I can get a little extra time. And unfortunately, within that first week, my mom wasn't feeling very well, was taken to the hospital, and within 12 hours, just unexpectedly died of a heart attack. So I think my biggest regret is that I never got around or took the time to get those pictures to her. So it's kind of made me more aware that, okay, if I'm gonna do something, get it out there fast. I mean, she obviously knew he was there and he existed and everything else, but I think it would have been nice if she had been able to meet him, at least through pictures, and to see a lot of herself in him as, as a child and her as a young child. So it really is kind of one of the regrets I have about my life.
Thank you so much for sharing that story about your mother and what you wish for. And I'm sure that she knows your heart and she knows how you feel, and she understands. Who in your life made the most impact?
Two people, I guess, in particular would come to mind. First would be my grandmother. And both my grandfathers died when they were in their 40s. So they were long before I was born. And my mom's mom decided to fill her time with traveling. So she spent a lot of time going to all sorts of different places all over the world. And every time she went to someplace, she'd bring something back. And she also took lots of pictures. So when we spent time with her, a lot of times she and I would sit down and just go through slides of different places and see different peoples and things. And so it just gave me kind of this desire to go out and see the world in all these different exotic places. And then the second big influence, I mentioned I'm a scuba diver. Like a lot of people back in the 60s and early 70s, they watched the underwater world of Jacques Cousteau. So I'd say Jacques Cousteau is probably the second person that kind of influenced the direction of where I took my life. But I just was fascinated with the marine life. I was, just the technology of being able to breathe underwater. So I grew up in Indiana, not near a whole lot of big oceans. But at age 15, I went down to the YMCA and I decided I wanted to get scuba certified. So we did that. And our checkout dives, of course, like most people in the Midwest, were it was in a murky lake. But I can still remember the excitement I had at seeing just this small little bluegill swimming past as you're underwater. You're supposed to be focusing on your skills, but of course you're looking around, just the fascination of being able to be down there and see those things. So, I mean, today I've had the opportunity to travel and work all over around the world. And I've been a PADI instructor for 25 years now.
What is your most favorite place on earth to visit that you've been so far?
That'd be a tough question. I can't really, I mean, there's just all sorts of things. I mean, Africa is just an interesting country. I mean, the wildlife and things like that. I mean, the history in Europe, and then just Asia just is completely different than growing up in America. The foods and everything else, the sights, the culture. So that really kind of is a tough question. I think if you're looking for diving, and probably my favorite diving place is Cocos off of Costa Rica. Just a lot of big marine life and just lots and lots of things to see. So that definitely would be the best place for diving. But as far as visiting, I kind of get something out of every place I go.
So speaking of traveling, if you could travel in a time machine back to talk to your younger self, so your current age, you could travel back and give advice based on what you now know about life, what advice would you give your younger self?
Maybe take more chances emotionally, or putting myself out a little bit more as a child. My dad moved a lot just from his work and things like that. So I would go into different places and I'd make friends. So it's kind of like being in the military, right? So you've got to, make new friends and things like that. And a lot of times it was difficult to make deep connections with kids, at least right away. I mean, I could always talk to adults pretty easily because there's not a lot of downside to that. But I think being a little reticent or a little reserved to kind of just take emotional chances, or just trying to be myself around other people, always a part you always kept back. So I think I do a much better job now, but I think I missed a lot of opportunities when I was younger to have experiences and make connections that today would serve me better, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. And there's a lot of wisdom to be yourself and learn how to show up in the world in your most confident self. What habits or beliefs have shaped you to who you are today?
I've always believed in having hobbies or extracurricular activities. I think it's important to take a time out of every day to do something that isn't focused on your work or whatever, to take some time for yourself. And that, that could be exercise. I like to try to get out and exercise every day or walk. I walk the dog twice a day. So to get out of the world, I like to garden and I have other hobbies like that. So I think it gives you a chance to kind of develop another part of your brain. The other thing I think it's important to do is part of getting out there is volunteering. And so I've tried to instill that in my sons. I've done some volunteering with my older son together, but I volunteered at school, and being a military spouse, I volunteered helping the military as well. And I just think it makes you a better person, a more rounded person. Otherwise, you get to be too one-dimensional, and I think you just miss on a lot of opportunities around yourself around your world, to see other people and meet other people.
Imagine for a second that you were sentenced to life in prison. I know it's not a great thing to think about, but in this sentence, the judge says you're allowed to keep one book with you in your cell for the rest of your life. What would be the book you'd bring with you to jail, and why that book?
To be honest, I'm a slow reader, so I don't read a lot, because unless I need to find out something or have a deep interest in things. I know I should read more, and I certainly know that because I buy a lot of books that are sitting on my bookshelf that I'm going to read when I have time. And I've probably given away a lot of books that I've never read. So that would be a tough one for me. I probably would be more inclined to seek out the world's biggest book of crossword puzzles or Sudoku, and I like the challenge of puzzles, and that would have to be probably more than just trying to pick a book to read, to be honest with you.
That is creative, and I like Sudoku. So it keeps you thinking and it keeps your mind sharp. What is a superpower you wish you had?
I've always been envious of people that can speak multiple languages, and I can make my way around in a couple of languages. So the ability, I think, to be able to communicate with anybody or anything. So as you travel, I'd like to be able to have more in-depth conversations, maybe with people that I meet along the way. I'd like to know what my dog is thinking. So having the ability to understand creatures would be great too. But I think the ability to have, I like the challenge of going into a place and trying to make myself understood and communicating in different ways that people do find to communicate with one another. But it'd be nice sometimes to be able to ask that more in-depth question or understanding of that person. And then also to be able to tell people how much you appreciate their kindness and their openness when they're helping you around in places you haven't been to, and you're having difficulty navigating, let's say, the system or the communication aspects of it.
So Dan, in financial planning, what is a piece of advice you commonly hear being told to people that you want to help people avoid that because it's not good advice for them?
Part of what I do in my work as far as financial services goes, we work with people trying to teach them how money works, and then develop financial plans that work for them. And I think a lot of professionals, unfortunately, are out there, and they tend to forget to look at what the client's real needs are. So they're giving advice that may be the sort of mentality of one size fits all. And so when you're dealing with a financial advisor, a lot of times they're looking at products that maybe worked 20 years ago or didn't work 20 years ago. And as products evolve and change, they're not making advice that's, it's dated advice. So with anybody, I think it's a good idea to listen to people. It's sort of like Reagan used to say, trust but verify. Getting a second opinion might not always, is always a good idea. So you have to be comfortable with the advice you're getting. And if you're uncomfortable with what's being told to you, it's probably not for you.
That is very, very sound advice. What is a failure or a challenge that you went through that you had to overcome, and what did you learn from it?
I guess back in the 80s, my three friends, myself and two friends, we decided we were going to start a software company. So I was working at doing programming. And so we started a company, and after 6 months, we weren't getting rich fast enough. So one of my friends left, but we were working with a product from a sort of a new company called Oracle. And they were trying to break into IBM's business. They weren't really that well known. And this is 3 or 4 years before they went public. And so we were one of the few people, I think, that were working with their product, and we were developing our own report writing software system. And because there were so few people developing products for them, applications for them, we kind of stuck out. So at one point they decided they wanted us to come work for them. And I think being young and a little overconfident, we said, no, we don't want to be employees of anybody. And I think you can see today, there's one company that is, a multi-billion-dollar public company. The other one is not, and doesn't exist anymore. So I think in looking at making important decisions, having your ego kind of get in the way doesn't necessarily lead to the best decision that can be made. And the other big lesson is that there are very few great opportunities presented to you in life. And you really do need to have your eyes open to recognize when you do have a great opportunity and to take advantage of those opportunities when they come, because they're not going to be very often.
So this entire podcast, the goal is by giving access to people like yourself, it'll hopefully help people take some action or have some experience that they may have held back on before. They'll help them live their best life. If you could only offer one piece of advice to the listeners about something that would help them live their best life, what would be that piece of advice you'd give them?
I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to take chances. And whether that is trying something new, traveling somewhere you haven't been to, maybe trying a new food. I think the problem is we sometimes are scared of making a fool of ourselves, or maybe doing something that doesn't look exactly that cool, especially if you have kids around. You don't want to be looking too foolish. And I think the biggest thing is you, by taking chances and doing things maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone, you won't regret not having tried. I mean, that's really, I'd rather regret having done something and maybe been a little bit foolish when I did it, or maybe it didn't work out. I've started a number of businesses and they failed, and I'm glad I tried. But I'd rather not have the regret later saying, well, I wish I had tried.
I like that. And it is so true to take chances, because we have one life, and I like to know that I lived every day to the fullest. And sometimes that means taking action in the face of resistance when you're afraid, right? Do not take, and that way you don't live a life with regret.
If somebody heard you today and would like to connect with you, first, would you like them to connect with you? And what would be the best way? Do you have a website? Would you like to provide your email? What's the best way for somebody to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'd love to connect to people, and if they want to look at me, I'm on LinkedIn. They can get a hold of me there. Just look up Daniel Sakai. That's Sakai, or they can send me an email if they'd like at daniel.sakai@wealthwave.com.
I do want to thank you for your time, Dan. It's been a pleasure having you on our podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to get to know you as well, and Dan, and for having me today.